The hearing will come to order. Subcommittee today meets to receive testimony on the Navy, Marine Corps, and Air Force budget requests for combat aircraft programs for fiscal year 2016. I'd like to welcome our distinguished panel of witnesses today. Vice Admiral Paul Grosslags, Principal Military Deputy to the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Research, Development, and Acquisition, and we just had a hearing once again, so we're wearing you out, Admiral. Lieutenant General John M. Davis, Deputy Commandant of the Marine Corps for Aviation, Rear Admiral Michael C. Manazar, Director of Air Warfare Division for the United States Navy, Major General Timothy M. Ray, Director, Global Power Programs, and Lieutenant General Mike Holmes, Air Force Deputy Chief of Staff for Plans and Requirements. First of all, I thank you for all your service and look forward to the testimony today. As we review the fiscal year budget requests for combat aviation forces, it's clear the Budget Control Act of 2011 continues to force the military to make short-time decisions that have long-term consequences on our national security. It's clear that the combat aviation programs of the Navy, Marine Corps, and Air Force are confronted by trade-offs in capability, capacity, and readiness. Capabilities are those modernization programs that provide the systems necessary to defeat current and future threats. Capacity is the ability to retain sufficient force structure to meet current and future requirements, and readiness is the training in these systems. The Navy and Marine Corps are facing shortfalls in fighter aircraft. For fiscal year 2016, the Navy deferred 16 F-35s in the future defense program, trading capability for today's readiness. The Navy has truncated its procurement of F/A 18E/F aircraft, also trading capacity for readiness. Now the Navy will be 134 aircraft below its requirements of fighter aircraft in the 2020 timeframe, with an average of about 100 aircraft short between now and 2020. If we assume that a shortfall of 65 aircraft will be manageable for the Navy, this leaves the Navy short about 35 aircraft, or 3 squadrons of strike fighters. Last year, the Air Force canceled the F-16's Combat Avionics Program Extension, or CAPES. CAPES would have equipped the Block 40, 42, 50, and 52 fleets with new radars and defense systems that increase survivability against emerging threats. This trade was made to meet today's readiness requirements. This year, as it did last year, the Air Force is proposing to retire over half of its A-10 fleet, reducing fighter capacity below the Air Force's 2,000 aircraft requirement. Increasing the OCO funding requests to offset the solution is something that you've seen in the papers and the news. There was a critical vote taken last night. I'm proud to say I think it went the right way. We didn't get the complete fix that many people, such as myself, wanted. But this is a beginning, and of course the ideal solution from my standpoint is to repeal the sequester. But this is not going to happen with the deal, but as I said, we did get part of the pie, and we got to continue this. And much of your testimony, many of you have been here before, and it's not just this committee that has to hear this, it's the rest of Congress. I am concerned that this budget request will reduce both capacity and in our strike fighter forces, affect readiness, and result in a higher risk in achieving military objectives in the future. I look forward to our service witness testimony today, which I hope will expand on the risks associated with the capacity and capability reductions in our combat aviation forces. I was going to turn to Ms. Sanchez. I think she's running a little late, but when she gets here, I will ask her to make an opening statement as the ranking member. And without objection, all witnesses' prepared statements will be included in the hearing record. Admiral Grosslegs, will you please proceed with your opening statement, followed by the rest of the panel as we go down. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Distinguished members of the subcommittee, we appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to address our Navy and Marine Corps aviation programs. As you well know, the United States is a maritime nation. We have global interests and global responsibilities. Our Navy and Marine Corps provide the continuously forward-deployed, persistent presence which ensures our nation's global reach, global access, and ability to project power regardless of changing alliances, permissions, or circumstances on the ground. We move at will across the world's oceans, the seas, and the littorals, providing our nation's leaders with offshore options, where it matters and when it matters. The aviation component of our Navy and Marine Corps team enables our sea-based and expeditionary naval forces to bring simultaneous influence over vast stretches of the maritime environment, across the shoreline, and deep inland. As such, it is critical that our aviation forces remain always ready and poised to engage at a moment's notice with the required capacity and capability to influence events and, if necessary, to fight and to win. Last year, we saw significant advancements in many of our aviation programs. The first P-8 deployment to the Western Pacific, stand-up of a second Special Purpose MAGTAF, formed around the capabilities of the V-22 and the KC-130J. Initial qualification of the Joint Strike Fighter on board an aircraft carrier. This year, we look forward to a number of additional milestones, to include the initial operational capability of the F-35B with the Marine Corps, initiation of sensor testing on our MQ-4C Triton ISR platform, first flight of the Marine Corps CH-53K by the end of this year, our first deployment of the E-2D Hawkeye started this month on the Theodore Roosevelt. Along with the Air Force, we have declared initial operational capability for the AIM-120D and will IOC the AIM-9X Block 2 this month. For 2016, our naval aviation budget request is based on a number of central themes: fifth-generation fighter and attack capability, netted persistent multi-role intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, critical supporting capabilities in electronic attack, maritime patrol, and vertical lift, advanced strike weapons programs, readiness recovery, and targeted modernization of the force to ensure continued relevance and sustainability. As this subcommittee is well aware, while our security interests face an increasing array of threats and demands, our budget position grows ever more challenging. We will continue to prioritize the readiness of the forces currently forward deployed over all other investments. However, we must also recognize that those Navy and Marine Corps forces this nation deploys to meet the future threat will be dependent upon the modernization and the readiness efforts provided by the programs of today. Across the department, our strategies for the development, procurement, and sustainment of both current and future weapon systems are critically dependent upon stable and predictable funding at a level commensurate with our PB-16 budget request. The alternative has been made clear by our secretaries and our service chiefs: a smaller force, a force less forward deployed, a force slower to respond in a crisis, and a force which, when it does respond, will be less capable and more vulnerable. Mr. Chairman, we request your leadership and the support of this subcommittee to provide the resources that enable your Navy and Marine Corps to be our nation's first responders. We again thank you for the opportunity and look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Admiral. General Davis.
Grosslegs spoke for the Department of Navy, sir.
We have one statement for the department.
Thank you. Admiral?
Yes, sir. Same thing. One statement for us.
Okay. General?
Thank you, Chairman Cook, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. Thank you for your continued support to the United States Air Force, our airmen, and their families. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to address the subcommittee today, and I'd like to start with a few opening remarks, and then we'll ask that our full written testimony be placed in the record, and thank you for agreeing to that. Our Air Force remains the most globally engaged Air Force on the planet, and we continue to do our best every day to deliver global vigilance, global reach, and global power for America. However, after more than 25 years of sustained combat operations and years of constrained budgets, it's become more difficult to achieve our mission. The President's FY16 budget and the budget levels there take some steps to improve the situation, but our ability to meet the objectives of the National Defense Strategy is increasingly at risk. The President's budget levels work to maximize the contributions of our total force, Guard, Reserve, and Active, reinforce investments in nuclear deterrence and space control operations, emphasize global long-range and non-permissive capabilities, and preserve the Air Force's top 3 procurement programs, the F-35, the KC-46, and the Long-Range Strike Bomber. It also gives us the ability to halt reductions in total force end strength and relieve pressure on our most important weapon, our airmen, continue efforts to regain full spectrum readiness, and lay the groundwork for future innovation efforts with seed investments. After subtracting pass-through, the Air Force share of the 2016 defense budget is roughly 22%. Within this share of defense resources, the Air Force submission attempts to balance risk driven by shortfalls in capacity, readiness, and modernization that you described well, Mr. Chairman, to provide global vigilance, reach, and power in support of the defense strategy, both today and in the future. Shortfalls in capacity mean we must accept some risk in our ability to do everything we're expected to do. And the first of many difficult capacity decisions is the decision to divest the A-10. There's no question that the A-10 has been a steady and stellar performer in recent conflicts. Nevertheless, our current force structure is simply unaffordable in today's fiscal environment. Consistent with fiscal year 2015 Department of Defense guidance to accept risk in current force structure and favor multi-role aircraft to satisfy defense strategic guidance, the FY16 presidential budget again reflects the hard choice to divest the A-10. Divesting the entire A-10 fleet frees up $4.7 billion across the future years defense program, providing funding for priority capacity, capability, and readiness needs. Next, budget realities have forced the Air Force to make the decision to reduce the EC-130 Compass Call fleet by nearly half after FY15, providing a $470 million savings across the FYDP that we've applied toward enterprise capability upgrades. While the Air Force will maintain essential capabilities to support current combat operations, this decision is not without risk. Once the fleet size drops to 8 aircraft in FY16, we will only be able to support our current operational obligations. We face another significant capacity challenge in preferred munitions, where 3 years of constrained budgets have left the Air Force thousands of weapons short in both air-to-surface and air-to-air weapon inventories. To begin to address these munitions capacity shortfalls, the FY16 President budget provides $1.8 billion in FY16 and $7.3 billion over the FYDP to increase procurement rates. As we attempt to balance these capacity demands, we continue to face shortfalls in readiness that are the result of previous funding gaps and sustained high operations tempo. The strain on training programs, weapon system sustainment, and deploy-to-dwell rates directly impacts our ability to provide fully mission-ready units to the combatant commanders. These readiness shortfalls continue to exacerbate the capacity shortfalls. In addition to shortfalls in capacity and readiness, the Air Force faces shortfalls in critical capabilities. This means potential adversaries are closing the capability gaps that separate the U.S. military from potential foes, and this narrowed capability gap adds future risk to both mission and forces. The Air Force's fighter fleet is approaching an average age of 30 years, the oldest in the history of the Air Force. The fourth-generation F-15s and F-16s that comprise a majority of our fighter fleet require upgrades to both extend their lifespan and provide the combat capability required to prevail in today's increasingly contested environments. The advanced capabilities of our fifth-generation fighters, the F-22 and F-35, are critical to ensure our ability to fight and win in contested environments. And divesting the A-10 allows us to invest $4.9 billion across the FYDP in F-16 and F-15 modernization and service life extensions, and $600 million across the FYDP to ensure we maintain the operational superiority of the F-22 against rapidly improving threats. The multi-role F-35A is the centerpiece of our future fighter precision attack capability. It's designed to penetrate air defenses and deliver precision-guided munitions in an increasingly contested threat environment. The F-16 PB includes $6.7 billion for procurement and development of 44 F-35As. 2 decades of continual operations, coupled with constrained and unstable budgets, have taken their toll on our Air Force and our airmen. In anticipation of even greater challenges, we've developed a strategy-driven, resource-informed plan to guide the way our service organizes, trains, and equips to prepare for future operations. Our revised strategic planning and programming process will look beyond the fight out to 20 years into the future, allowing us to identify and shape decisions in advance to provide agile and adaptable weapon systems and processes. Our FY16 budget takes steps to balance the many challenges we face in capacity, capability, and readiness. Any return to sequestration level funding will directly impact all 3 areas, leaving us smaller, less ready, with less of an advantage over our potential adversaries. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, for your continued support of our Air Force and the opportunity to discuss with you as we work together to face these challenges. We look forward to your questions, and with your permission, I'll yield to my colleague, Major General Ray, for a few comments.
Thank you, Chairman Cook and members of the committee. My apologies for General Polakowski's inability to make it here today, so I'll be testifying on her behalf. It is an honor to be here, and I thank you for the opportunity to testify before the committee on the subject of aircraft modernization, an area that is critical to the future of our Air Force and our nation. It's also an honor to share the witness table with my fellow airmen, Lieutenant General Holmes, and certainly my colleagues from the Department of the Navy. General Holmes described for you the challenges the Air Force faces in achieving our mission with years of constrained budgets. He shared with you the choices we made to balance capacity, readiness, and modernization. I would like to focus my opening remarks on modernization. Given the current budget realities, we must make wise fiscal decisions that allow us to remain the premier Air Force in the world. These decisions must include how best to modernize the existing fleet while sustaining our ability to keep the aircraft development programs we have on record on track. Now more than ever, we must continue investing in the science and technology in modernizing our capabilities. Our FY16 budget reflects the Air Force priorities in these areas. Our Air Force fighter force modernization continues to place a priority on continuing the development of the F-35, and the FY16 budget requests the purchase of 44 aircraft. The budget also includes modernization efforts for the F-22 for improved air-to-ground capabilities and capabilities to counter the advancing threat with improved electronic protection and air-to-air missile capabilities. We will also invest approximately $2.2 billion across the FYDP for the F-15 fleet. This includes service life extensions, integration of the latest precision weapons, and radar modernization. For the F-16, we will invest approximately $1 billion across the service life extension, operational flight program enhancements, and upgrades to mission processors. We've also included a recapitalization of the Joint STARS fleet and continue the combat rescue helicopter. Another focus area is our effort to overcome shortfalls in our munitions inventories, as General Holmes mentioned. The FY16 President's budget makes important investments in science and technology. We continue to focus our S&T investments on technologies that will enable us to modernize our capabilities while exploring game-changing technologies for the future. The current global security environment is more complex, dynamic, and uncertain than ever before. Our adversaries are developing technologies and capabilities that attempt to shape and deter our nation. We recognize we cannot maintain our edge through technology alone. It will require fresh thinking and innovation regarding how we acquire and manage our acquisition process. The Air Force Strategic Vision, a call to the future, speaks to our need for strategic agility, which means our modernization efforts must provide us the ability to rapidly act. Toward that end, our acquisition enterprise is pursuing agile techniques such as open systems, modularity, designing and resiliency, prototyping, and experimentation. In particular, we will capitalize on these techniques in the Joint STARS recap and our new trainer, the TX. Finally, we will continue our focus on affordability. Affordable systems are critical to providing the right balance between capacity and modernization. In conclusion, our modernization efforts are critical to the future of the Air Force. We believe that we've made prudent investments in modernization while continuing a strong science and technology investment. We must constantly strive to be better stewards of taxpayers' resources, making every dollar count and achieving maximum buying power for our investments. We must continue to institute service-wide efficiencies that will capitalize on innovative concepts, keep weapon systems on track, and build affordability into new systems. Mr. Chairman, with your committee's help, working together, we will remain the world's greatest air, space, and cyber force. We look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank the panel very much, and this time I'd like to welcome the ranking member, Ms. Sanchez, who has joined us, and she has an opening statement, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So nice to have a Californian chairing today. I'm sorry I was late, gentlemen. I was doing the C-SPAN show this morning and didn't get over in time. This year's budget is up significantly for all three services compared to fiscal year 2015. In the Navy, we have a $1.3 billion increase above 2015 levels. In the Air Force, a $3.2 billion increase. Of course, this is all going to depend on the whole process that we have here in the Congress and where we end up. Also with respect to sequestration, what goes on there. In addition to increased funding, the Air Force has deferred the potential retirement of a number of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft. We see the E-8 Joint Stars, the E-3 AWACS, and the U-2 aircraft have all been postponed until after 2019. The Air Force also has increased funding sustainability for MQR Reaper unmanned aircraft. But I also want to note to our committee that the services also made some difficult choices. I see that you're still proposing to retire the A-10 over the next 4-year period in an effort to save about $4 billion. And the Navy has not requested additional production of the FA-18 Super Hornets, and it's cut 16 F-35C aircraft over its 5-year budget. So I look forward to hearing from you how you came to those decisions and whether that really needs to stay in place in order for you to get to where you think you need to be. Both services have also requested increased amounts of funding for aerial munitions of almost all categories, traditional bombs, long-range precision-guided missiles, etc. I would also like to point out that many of these aerial weapons programs are actually performing very well. And they're under cost, they're in schedule, and they're on performance targets. So that's a good thing. For example, the AIM-120D and the AIM-9X Block II air-to-air missiles have emerged from operational testing with outstanding results. I mean, there's some good news in what you all are doing. Both programs are critical to maintaining U.S. air superiority in any future conflict, so it's important to get them right. It's also worth noting that these are joint programs between Air Force and Navy, and I always like to see when that happens, because hopefully over time maintenance and operation is also lowered. We're going to have in April a hearing on the F-35 program, obviously. It's the big elephant in the room in so many ways. But I think it's still relevant to the overall topic today of the budget. And while I know that we need the F-35 program, it's the only production plane that we have for our future that we've got. There's still some concerns about the development and the timing and the testing of this aircraft. I'm worried about the serious engine fire that we had last year. It's a concern because there's just one engine that we have, and so we need to get to the bottom of what happened. Hopefully it was just an isolated incident, but we need to figure that out. And secondly, the F-35 is entering what I think is one of the most difficult stages, and that's where we see all the software and the integration and everything come together. And this fusion is incredibly important, and from what I'm hearing, may not be going as well as we had hoped. So I hope you'll enlighten us a little bit where you can on that. So the engine and the software, very, very critical pieces of making sure that we get this aircraft going and online and tested and flown, and for the future of not only our services, Mr. Chairman, but I've talked to a lot of our international partners who have signed up for these aircraft, and they are constantly asking me, are we going to get this done? So I appreciate the time, and I look forward to the answers today.
Thank you, Ms. Sanchez. General Davis, a report on Monday of this week by Bloomberg said that flight testing of software essential to delivering the plane's promised capabilities was supposed to be completed last month, but now may take until mid-June, and that deficiency will be fixed later this year and aren't severe enough to delay the Marine Corps' declaration. General Bogdan is quoting as saying the service understands the limitation and has operational workarounds to ensure they have the capability they need. What are those limitations, and what is the operational impact if the Marine Corps declares its F-35 initial operational capability this summer?
Mr. Chairman, thanks for letting me answer. First off, the F-35 for us, for our nation, for our Marine Corps, is going to give us a fifth-generation first-aid capability with the ability to go take off from amphibious ships and also land on 3,000-foot ships. So wherever our Marines are fighting, they get a great combat capability, in a lot of ways, a lot more than we have today with our legacy fleet. I'll answer a couple of things, and actually, if I could, to Congresswoman Sanchez's question as well on the engine, because I think that's applicable as well. The engine we're seeing right now is very reliable. You got 10,000 hours on the motor. We did have one problem last summer that we believe we've corrected. I talked to the pilots and the squadron commanders who are flying this airplane last night. A very reliable motor from our perspective, to include the lift fan. On the fusion capability we talked about and the software capability we talked about, we're tracking about 13 different categories inside our program to make sure that we've got this thing on track. From the fusion and the software, we're actually seeing what we need and tracking for what we need to declare initial operating capability in July of this year. We still have more test points to get. We take it to the ship in May, and we won't declare IOC until we have all those conditions met for this airplane. But on the software side, one of the things is four-ship fusion. We do have some issues right now with four-ship fusion. That's 4 airplanes and the missionary data link that would share information together, real time. What we don't have, we found out we do have a problem with some latency with the 4-ship fusion, but we do not have a problem with 2-ship fusion. So right now, ship 1 and 2 and ship 3 and 4 can share information very, very readily. It's something we can't do today. So it's a combat capability we don't have today that we do have now with this airplane, and we're sharing the information between the first section and the second section through Link 16. That's working very well for us. The close air support software is actually working very well. We're able to, working through the APG-81 radar, take a bomb through the clouds, which we can't do right now. So doing close air support through the clouds, we're able to take voice 9-line briefs, and also with our 2B software on track for a VMF data link to basically take the CAS briefs via VMF. The software through the EOTS, which is our electro-optical targeting system, is allowing us to actually do night close air support, track moving targets, and also have better fidelity than our FLIR, than our Lightning Pod and our legacy aircraft right now. So the ALIS system we talked about in the software as well, again, that's tracking as per what we need for an IOC, with one workaround, which is requiring a human contractor to use a laptop computer for the propulsion system modifications. And the mission data files, we'll know more on that. We just got our first area of responsibility data load now, and we're going to test that this month out at the weapons school out in Yuma, Arizona. So we're going out there. I'll be out there tonight, but our pilots will fly for 30 days testing that mission data file. So on the software side, what we're seeing, and I talked to the squadron commanders and the guys who are flying it last night in preparation for today's testimony to give you ground truth for the pointing of the spear. They're very, very comfortable with what they've got right now. As good Marines, they'd always want more, but we're seeing actually an improved combat capability from what we have in Legacy today, much better, and we think we've got a good software load, stable software load for this airplane to declare an IOC.
Thank you. I was going to throw it open to the panel whether they wanted to also addressed the issue of the single engine, and Ms. Sanchez also raised some other subjects. So we can break it down, or right now, if anybody wants to jump in right now, feel free.
Sir, I'll talk real briefly about the engine, and without diving too far. It is on. Yes, I'll speak louder. I'll touch on the engine, but I don't want to take too much time to dive too deeply into the technology piece. But that occurred last summer. We very quickly identified the root cause. There was two components rubbing on each other internally. Engine created a lot of heat and thus a failure. That root cause was identified. Some restrictions were put on the fleet while we searched for corrections to that. We have essentially two temporary fixes in place today that allow the fleet to continue to fly across all type model series. Depending on the degree of the correction they've had, it equates to the amount of flight envelope that they're able to utilize. The long-term fix is still being worked with Pratt & Whitney, the engine manufacturer. But other than I'll call it temporary disruption to our test program, where we had to basically stop flying for a few days and then bring things back on slowly. As General Davis noted, the aircraft are back flying. They're flying real-world type training missions, and the engine's performing the way we expect it to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think General Davis and Admiral Grosskloks did a great job of describing the progress both in the software and the engine issue. I'd just note that the investigation into the engine was something new for us as we worked together among the three services and the partners to make sure that everybody knew what was going on, that everybody was aware of what we were finding, and that everybody was involved in the decision. So we did a joint safety board and a joint accident investigation board that let us all understand where we were in the process and be able to adjust. It has had a little bit of an impact and delay on testing program, because when we temporarily grounded the airplane and reduced their flight envelope as we worked through the issues, it delayed some of the test points. The JPO has been dedicated to supporting the Marine effort to reach IOC, and we're happy to help with that effort. We know that they plan to reach it first, and we've worked together with them to do that. And we look forward then to progressing toward our IOC sometime next year then.
Thank you. Mr. Norcross.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate the time, and welcome to the panel, and certainly appreciate your service. I was recently down in Pomona near Atlantic City visiting our unit there, the Air National Guard, and they were running the F-16s out of there. And time after time, their flyers and certainly the mechanics were asking me about the potential upgrades to the radar system. I'm not sure General Ray or Holmes, who's better able to address that. What is the schedule for that? They certainly are at wit's end waiting for that upgrade, which they had indicated had been postponed several times. Thank you.
So thank you, sir, for that question. With your permission, we'll both answer a couple of parts of it. So we canceled the CAPES program, as the chairman said, because it was unaffordable at our current budget level. We've received, as I'm sure you know, a joint urgent operational needs request from U.S. Northcom to take a look at how we might rapidly equip the F-16s that defend our nation with advanced electronically scanned antenna radar, with an ESA radar that provides increased capability to those airplanes. As we look at that request, that's important for that organization, but it's also part of an entire kill chain that would have to be in place to be able to let it operate. So you need both the sensor on the airplane, and then you need a surveillance system that would help you detect the kind of small cross-section threats that ESA radar gives you capability for, and you need the command and control system to be able to do it. Those elements are fall in place here in the National Capital Region, and we expect to try to move forward to provide a rapid capability there first, and then see how we would expand it across the country. And I'll ask General Ray to talk about the details of that timeline and process.
Good morning, sir. Thank you for the question. We are looking very closely at the capabilities that we require. We take this mission very seriously, defending the nation's skies. Looking at the F-16 and the options that we have in front of us, we want to make very clear in our minds that we are not limiting the capabilities in any efforts that we take on. So any of the capabilities that are out there now, existing radars, our ability to integrate that completely and to make a complete upgrade to the aircraft is a very lengthy period of time. So to meet the UON timelines, which is in the next 18 months, we have to look at putting radars on the airplanes, but we may lose some capabilities over what we actually have right now. So we want to strike the very careful balance between bringing on what we require for this specific mission and not making the capabilities of the airplane less. Now, we believe that we should have a decision here in the next month or two in terms of exactly how we'll do that. We're looking at a couple of options in terms of how we would acquire that, and certainly there's several different amounts of capability that we can add over time. I believe that we should have a pretty good schedule here in the next 1 to 2 months that would describe how we'll get after this problem. I think that, as General Holmes mentions, the National Capital Region is the easier part in terms of the entire kill chain. We remain concerned about the coverage for the rest of the country and the rest of the F-16 fleet. So I think that makes us focus very close here to the Washington, D.C. area and what we need to cover this area with a follow-on effort to go think through how best we'll equip those airplanes in the future.
Appreciate your answer. We are trying very much to give you your needed predictability. Obviously, yesterday was the first step in a process that hopefully at some point before the end of this year gives you the predictability you need. I would suggest to you that at that unit, they need predictability. Obviously, you know the area that they cover between New York and D.C. is vital, and certainly they have a history that they remember very much, as do the people who live along there. So anything you can do to expedite that, we would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. McSally?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time today and your testimony. Really appreciate it. General Holmes, wanted to follow up on the discussions on the A-10. Last cycle, you stated, or the Air Force stated, there was savings of $4.2 billion to divest in the A-10, and today you said 4.7, and then another time 4.9. Can you just confirm what the number is?
Yes, ma'am, thank you. The number is 4.7 is what we're bringing this year. 4.2 of that is O&M savings, and $500 million of it is cost avoidance on wing upgrades.
Okay, great, thank you. And can you confirm that this is primarily a budget decision and not a capabilities decision?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great, thank you. And can you, just for everybody's awareness, give a rundown of a typical combat load of the F-35 standard combat load?
Yes, ma'am. When the F-35 reaches its initial operation capability, it'll have the capability to carry internally 2 air-to-air weapons and 2 air-to-ground weapons. It'll have the radios and the digital communications to be able to communicate with folks on the ground. When it reaches its FOC, then it'll have the ability to carry heavier JDAMs, to be able to carry the SDB-2, to fire its internal gun, and to be able to carry external ordnance on the wings as well.
Okay, great. And so internal and external ordnance on the wings, it would be a standard combat load at FOC?
At FOC, yes, ma'am, it'll have that capability depending on the threat. And if the threat allows it to, then it can carry ordnance on the outside as well under the wings.
And how many bullets are in the gun?
I think it's 250.
I think it's 180.
Yes, ma'am.
Actually. That's one trigger pull on the A-10, just so you know. And we got plenty more of that. So, and the standard conventional load on the A-10, I'm sure you know what that is. I mean, we got over 1,150 rounds plus a variety of other weapons that we can carry. So if you had the resources, do you agree that there are situations, combat situations on the ground that the A-10 would be best suited in order to save lives?
Yes, ma'am.
Great, thank you. And then switching to the EC-130, so that, the Air Force is divesting in the A-10 and the EC-130, both stationed at Davis-Monthan, both in my district. I won't take that personally, but obviously I'm concerned about losing that capability. So you mentioned in your testimony, but I just want to confirm, the plan or the desire is to cut the fleet basically in half this fiscal year. But can you confirm, is there another capability in our Air Force that can do what the EC-130 does?
There are areas where the EC-130's capabilities overlap with other capabilities that are there, but there are certainly things that only the EC-130 does or that the EC-130 does best.
Right, and the EC-130s right now are deployed both to Afghanistan and in the fight against ISIS, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Great, and so we have nothing to replace it. for some unique capabilities they have. They're deployed at a pretty high rate. They've been deployed continuously for a long period of time, yet we're going to cut that capability in half. Is there anything in development that's going to be replacing the EC-130?
We are considering some options to do that. As you know, we're embarked on a program to upgrade our J-Stars and replace the J-Stars aircraft. Depending on how that program goes, we think it might offer some options for a rehosting of the EC-130 electronics as well. Yep. We're looking at options where we could take the existing electronics from the EC-130 and rehost them on another platform that would offer some performance advantages and be cheaper to operate in the future. And we'll kind of see how that J-Stars program goes and then see if we're able to adapt that approach to some of our other weapon systems.
Okay, thank you, sir. Do you, can you give me the number of what savings you project you would have by cutting the EC-130s in half this fiscal year? What's that number? Do you know? You don't have to, I mean, if you could just get to
Yes,
me. Yes,
ma'am. It's roughly $470 million across the FIDA.
Okay, if you could get me the FY16 number,
yes,
that'd be great. I'm sure you can appreciate that we've said there's a unique capability that the EC-130 brings, that we don't have another capability yet. We don't have anything necessarily fully in development to replace it, yet we're cutting it in half. I mean, do you appreciate that logic is concerning to those who want to make sure that we can protect the warfighters that are deployed?
Yes, ma'am, I do. And our problem is that I don't have enough money to do all the things that I'd like to provide for warfighters. And I have to make decisions within that. There are many areas that I have limits placed on where I can go to achieve savings, particularly in capacity from Congress and from the department. And so I'm limited in the places that I can go when I have to go to capacity to save money.
Okay, thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, I want to talk about the F-18. So the Navy, in testimony and also provided to this committee, information that says by 2020 you will be short 100 F-18s. And he also said that this number is due to grow because of some particular factors. So in looking back at the materials that we've had before this committee, before all the way back to 2009, we show a different shortfall every program year. For example, in 2009, the projection was 125 aircraft. A year later, it was 145. In 2011, it was 177. In 2014, the shortfall was only 18 aircraft. So can you tell me the credibility when I see, 18 to 100? I mean, that's kind of a bit loose and 3, 4, 5-fold difference. Why is that? And what am I not seeing here? Do we just think that 82 planes will fall out of the sky this year? Or where are we going with this? Why are the numbers so dramatically different? Are we guessing? Do we really have ways in which we're trying to figure this out? And it appears to me that the Navy has a throughput problem. Not a lack of aircraft in terms of numbers. And as a result, should Congress be focusing on better funding the depot operations rather than just buying more planes to put through the same, rather than to put them through inefficient depot repairs? What's going on here? What's the approach we need to be thinking about here?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the question, and it's a great opportunity to be able to address naval aviation here. I enjoyed the opportunity to chat with you last year about kind of the same topic. So I'd like to discuss our strike fighter inventory management from the depot throughput of our F-18 A++s and Charlies, Bravos and Deltas, through the sustainment and eventual extension of the F-18EF, which is going to occur in the middle of the 2020s, to the procurement of F-35C. Given that there are two hotlines, the F-18EF and G hotline in St. Louis and the F-35 A, B, and C hotline, and for the Department of the Navy, that would be the Bravo and the Charlie models down in Fort Worth, we have wonderful opportunities to recapitalize our force. Certainly the 2016 President's budget has increased risk in our ability to sustain our inventory management. But to your point about numbers, we have a very, very precise model. And it's so precise that when you change an input, it will tell you exactly where your shortfall exists and in what year and how many. And so since 2009, I've been involved in this process, either as part of the solution, but mostly probably part of the problem. And in this position as the Director of Air Warfare, we closely manage that inventory shortfall. The chairman correctly described the manageable shortfall of 65 airplanes. In the United States Navy, we tier our readiness. We don't keep our readiness at the top level. That means we don't need all of the airplanes all of the time. We only support the deployed units at the top level. So we can manage with 65. When we have a shortage over the next 5 years of about 100 aircraft, that tracks to the CNO's statement that he would like to have 2 to 3 squadrons to reduce the risk in our inventory management of F-18s, because that's an additional 35 aircraft to the 100 you talked about. When you look at the strike fighter inventory management piece, use the word shortfall. That is a conclusive word that says, I know what the supply is, I know what the demand is, and I know what my usage rate is. Therefore, the formula says I have a shortfall, and it's 135. That's if you leave everything identical. You don't change the supply, i.e. depot throughput in the near term. So let's talk about that for a second. I want to make the depot more efficient. When we started to project the work that needed to be done to extend the service life of the F-18C from 6,000 hours, inspect it to 8,000 hours of service life, and now going to 10,000 hours, a 67% increase, we expected to do structural work on the airplane. What we did not expect is the amount of corrosion we found inside the airplanes, deep inside the airplanes, that were from years and years of use in austere environments on land and then also in the salt air environment on the carriers. That corrosion control work was not having to be accomplished if we stopped flying the airplane at 6,000 hours. That also added work to the depots. We used a lean process in manufacturing to get the work done based on programmed work. The problem is that corrosion added unplanned work, and so the depots have now had to go to a theory of constraints, and they're very good at looking at the capacity we have in the depots. Use a theory of constraints method called critical chain project management. In FRC Southeast in Jacksonville, Florida, and in FRC Southwest at North Island, Coronado, California, they're putting a new process in place, such that, for instance, when we look at our depot throughput, and it was noted that our depot throughput needs to improve, we assumed that the depot, with all of its resources, could put 17 airplanes through the depot at any one time. So you have 17 airplanes at work. An analysis using theory of constraints.
Gentlemen, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm going to ask that you kind of shorten your answers, because we had a quorum call and then 15 minutes, and then we're going to have votes, so that everyone else, if you could kind of make it shorter. Okay, you know, as I said, I apologize. And
Strike fighter inventory management is very complex, difficult, short answer. Let me just do this. We've got a new process in place. It's going to be more efficient. We're going to turn this around and get those airplanes. Then we're going to extend the E's and F's, and we still have the opportunity with 2 hot lines to be able to use that to reduce the risk. Procurement of F-35C is the other end. As we discussed, the Navy and the Marine Corps have to get the F-35C to win. I hope that answers part of the question.
Well, we'll discuss it out of committee. Thank you.
there's going to be a test after this. Let's see if you pass. Mr. Knight?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll try and keep my comments a little brief and just allow you to answer to the Navy. I haven't heard anything about the Growler program. Are we on stage there? Are we needing more Growlers, especially as the F-35 comes online? The Growler is going to be a very useful tool with the F-35.
Yes, sir. As the Department of Defense's only airborne electronic attack airplane, that is true. Very useful. We integrate our capabilities with the stealth characteristics of the F-35C and the electronic capabilities of the Growler. We get a very, very good integrated piece. We have 153 Growlers. That's satisfactory for the Navy mission. We're embarking on a study, as the Chief of Naval Operations said, to evaluate the number we need for the joint mission going forward. The line still being open in St. Louis keeps our options open.
Good, good. Thank you, sir. To the Air Force, you know, we're in a stage where it's not first sight, first kill. It's actually first shot, first kill with the 5th generation fighters, and with the Aerospace Innovation Initiative, and kind of the change to the X-plane platforms over the last 20 years. Do you see us still moving into an era where we're gonna fly the wings off a fighter for the next 50 years and then try and go on to the next generation and then fly the wings off it for 50 years, instead of moving more toward bringing in today's technology about every 15 years as we used to do?
Yes, sir. Thank you for that question. The short answer is that we've realized how difficult it is to make these very lengthy aircraft programs, just as you mentioned. We've done a lot of thinking about this, and we do believe that there is a very clear need to move to a capabilities-based development. Recent efforts in the Air Force have been chartered by the Secretary and the Chief to allow us to take a very bold look at how we maintain air superiority in 2030. And the mindset there will be to build a learning campaign on how to aggregate the capabilities that we have and to put the technologies in play that will keep the air-to-air kill chain resilient in 2030 and beyond. We think that there's a tremendous amount of learning, experimentation, and prototyping that has to happen to make that a reality. Mr. Kendall's Aircraft Innovation Initiative is a piece of that. That is a touch point for both the Navy and the Air Force. But for the Air Force's role in that particular piece, we're going to take a much broader look at how we do this as an Air Force, as an enterprise, as a family of systems. Certainly there will be something that flies, something that will be in the battle space. Exactly how we do that is not defined, but we know we need to bring the technologies we're going to have to play, not the technologies that we want. So it will take a great deal of collaboration and learning to do that in time.
Thank you, sir. And I will say one compliment to the F-35. It's doing very well at Edwards Air Force Base and hitting its test points and almost overachieving in many of the areas that they didn't think it would. So, but my last question, Mr. Chair, with your indulgence, is, we're going into an era where the airframe is going to be the biggest deal. It's not going to be the speed and the armament. It is going to be the airframe, and you can't change the airframe. So if we keep that airframe for 40 or 50 years, we are stuck with it. And that is the change to innovation of how we see the aircraft, how the aircraft can get into enemy lines, and that will be my continued question as we move through this process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Vesey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And they have called votes. So.
Oh, they have called votes. Okay, I'll be just really quick. I just wanted to ask particularly about the inventory, this Joint Strike Fighter inventory. I know that that we've heard testimony that the Strike Fighter shortfall of 2 to 3 squadrons is 2 to 3 squadrons worth of aircraft, and is the Navy Strike Fighter inventory sufficient to support operational demand?
Sir, thank you. I'll refer to the answer I gave to a ranking minority member for the inventory management. The F-35C numbers that the Navy and the Marine Corps needs are not being procured in the numbers that we need to go into the future. The President's budget from the United States Navy and United States Naval Aviation had to defer 16 F-35Cs out of the FIDIP for fiscal reasons and priorities of the Department. We use 35 to 39 strike fighters a year just in utilization attrition. If you're not replacing 35 to 39 aircraft a year, you cannot sustain your inventory into the future. We're looking very closely at that, and we look forward to working with Congress on acquiring enough airplanes to meet our strike fighter needs.
Lieutenant General Holmes, last question for me. Can the F-35 provide the ground cover that's needed? I know there's been a lot of talk about, the A-10 and the ground cover that it provides, but can the F-35 provide sufficient ground cover in the theater that troops will need without having an A-10 type plane?
Thank you, sir. You heard General Davis talk about how the Marines feel about the F-35's ability to provide close air support, and I think they're comfortable that it will be able to do so. I think we are too, and I think the whole Air Force is involved in the close air support mission and the support of ground commanders. So the F-35 will play a role in that, but it won't just be the F-35. It'll be the F-35, the F-15, the F-16, and the whole Air Force enterprise can be devoted to that resource. And yes, sir, we feel confident we can continue to provide that mission.
Thank you.
If I could, sir, just to follow up on that from the Marine Corps side, on our inventory, we're replacing F-18s and Harriers that have performed exceptionally well in combat, but they're nearing the end of their service life. So the F-35B and the C, but the F-35B in large numbers for the Marine Corps is keeping that airplane on ramp and keeping that in production is really important to us. On how we'll support the Marines on the ground, we got our first day fight, first 5 days fight with 5th generation, so we can support our Marine in a contested environment, which we can't do as well as with our legacy airplanes right now. The other thing, when I go to a Block 3 software, I can actually load 14,000 pounds of external ordnance on the airplane. That's 3,000 pounds more than I can put on my F-18 today. So great, taking a lot of ordnance to the Marines and soldiers, sailors, and airmen when they need them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Graves, last question.
Real quickly, Admiral Manazer, you talked about the shortfall, and I'm very concerned about this. When we have fewer airframes out there to do the job, we put a lot of operational fatigue on those airplanes. And you talked about this, and just for the record again, and so I can start working to rectify this, how many airplanes do you need, how many Super Hornets do you need to eliminate that shortfall? How many do you need to procure?
Sir, we need to get to F-35Cs at 20 F-35Cs a year in 2020, but the CNO has already testified 2 to 3 squadrons of Super Hornets will reduce the risk to a manageable level. That would be 24 to 36 airplanes, and he's already testified to that, sir. I support that number.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You know, I just want to thank the panel. I had to speed up things because of the votes and everything. I had a few questions. They were not 5-syllable word questions. Since I'm an infantry officer, they were all going to be 1-syllable ones. But I'm sure I'm going to see you again, and I do, once again, want to thank you very much. We were constrained. We had a lot of people, other committees, and I know you come over here, and as I said, I appreciate your patience and indulgence, but most of all for your professionalism and for doing what you do. So stay safe, keep the troops safe, and we all thank you so much. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.